Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. So I'm Dr. Serge, and welcome to another episode of Search for the Truth. And as you guys know, our goal is to educate people, empower them, for them to go at the root cause of their health issues and feel better naturally. So today we're going to talk about a really, really important topic. It's important, sensitive topic as well, because all of us know somebody who fought or is fighting or actually succumbed to the disease, which is cancer. And today we have an expert, a specialist on cancer, Miss Patricia. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Serge. Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm very, very pleased to be here.
Awesome. So first of all, can you tell us about you yourself? Why you have this passion to help people who has been diagnosed with cancer and who's fighting the disease?
Well, my story goes back quite some time, because originally I was an oncology nurse. So I spent many years working in oncology, running chemotherapy clinics, working in late stage cancers, right across the whole remit. And at that point, I had the stereotypical ignorant attitude of there's nothing that is going to make a difference to people with cancer apart from chemotherapy. And as time went on and I looked at what we did with chemotherapy and the state it left people in, sometimes questioning, was that really the best possible thing we could do for them? I began to really open my mind to some of my patients, because I became very aware that the thing I couldn't do was answer any of their questions. So the big questions people ask: what can I do to help myself? What is my role in this? How can I stop losing weight? What shall I eat? Every answer was just, we don't know. We don't know. And then when people began to address things with us as, is this a good idea? Can I help myself? It was almost a little quiet chuckle in the staff room, because compared to chemotherapy, really, what is going to work against cancer? So I began to have a sea change when I really began to listen to people, particularly one lady, Gillian, who was just a powerhouse, was doing integrative medicine very quietly by herself without telling the oncologist, because he would think it was nonsense. And she, long story short, she outlived any prognosis. She was well, she was empowered. I stood outside her room, the oncologist, looking at her scan one day. He's going, "Look, Patricia, it's my best ever patient." And I go, "Yay, you're the man. Well done. Excellent." But it was, as we all do, we learn through the people we come across. And I began to think, well, really, I'm missing a trick here. I began to research what was going on. I began to look at different therapies. I began to find it really exciting that there was so much to healing from cancer that just wasn't confined to drugs. I mistakenly thought all my colleagues would find it very interesting too, and exciting. I'm still waiting for them to get excited, to be honest. But I gradually began to move away and decide, obviously became a little schizophrenic, being very interested in integrative medicine. It hardly existed at the time. This is 21 years ago. It was in a vacuum. It was pre-internet.
Yeah.
And I really began. And of course, once the internet came along and people have, started to empower themselves with information, a lot of people look at standard oncology and ask the big question, is it all it's cracked up to be? And, are we missing things here? So 21 years now of researching, working with people. I've now set up the Peat Institute to train practitioners, because as well as people being told they have no role to play in this, I've come across and helped train so many nutritionists, naturopaths, all sorts of practitioners who are wonderful and have spent years training, who are told, don't work with people with cancer. You might cause a problem. It might go wrong. And we now have our passion is to empower. We've empowered people, hopefully with knowledge and support, and now trying to empower practitioners with the same thing, and make the changes that need making.
You're right. And, like I said before the show, for the last 40 years in the USA, we spend billions of dollars on cancer research. And I wanted to show people a diagram. This is a short overview of what scientists came up with, right? And it's way more complicated than that. So the point of it is so many different pathways. One of the things that I hear all the time is, my mom got breast cancer, I got breast cancer, I'm afraid that my daughter's going to get breast cancer. Is cancer really genetic at the end of the day? What is cancer?
Cancer is a very individual thing. There is very little about it that is purely genetic that we know of. Of course, there is the BRCA gene, the HER2 gene, etc. What there is, Dr. Serge, is there are familial tendencies within families. There are familial tendencies, as some have familial tendencies towards cardiovascular disease, some towards diabetes. Some families have tendencies. And where I find, because of course, orthodox medicine never asks the question to a patient, let's have a look at what led to this. How did you get cancer? That never comes into the equation. But when you do that, when you use functional testing, when you look at the genetics, what you find, the familial things, a lot of it comes down to familial tendencies towards detoxification and methylation capacity. And what I mean by that, in this very, very toxic world that we have, that we are bombarded with, if our liver, our immune system is not able to, through some genetic polymorphism, which makes it slightly weaker, not able to deal with that bombardment, we are more prone to developing cancer. And a lot of people with very good lifestyles and diets develop cancer. So it's not just obviously that plays its big part, but there is some underlying things as well that we can explore. And there's an awful lot now of relationships being identified between viruses and bacteria and different cancers. So for each person, it's a perfect storm. But what we need to do is to look at that person individually and find out what their perfect storm is.
Good point. And I'm wondering if that's why Dr. Gerson, in the 50s, 40s, he came up with a protocol. And in his book that I read, he said that every cancer that they had to deal with started in the liver.
I've come to a conclusion similar, that the liver is playing an enormous part. It is a metabolic disease. Every way in which cancer has been looked at by the medical world, in terms of, is it genetic disease? They tried gene therapy. Yeah. It's like peeling the layers of an onion. The more genes you identify, the more there are. They've tried all sorts of things, and each time, ultimately, cancer has been resistant to it. It develops resistance. So you're dealing with something that is changing, is shaping itself, is learning to manipulate its environment. We need to be a lot cleverer and a lot more comprehensive in how we deal with cancer than just bashing it on the head and hoping that it responds. There's an old saying in nursing that throwing chemotherapy at resistant cancer is a bit like shouting louder at somebody who doesn't understand English. It just gets very frustrating and doesn't achieve anything. Yeah. And when it comes down to resistance with cancer cells, either chemotherapy works for a while and then stops, or doesn't work. Our medical world has no strategy whatsoever for dealing with that. It's moved to the next treatment, and then, we've run out of treatments. And that's what we've been doing since the dawn of time in treating cancer this way. And it's completely unsatisfactory. There's so much more integration has to offer that can tackle cancer on every single level. And we need people to know this. We need to get this message out.
Yeah. So we know, based on what you said from research, that cancer is not quite genetic. This is a myth. People are confused. It is an epigenetic condition at the end of the day, metabolic condition, like you said. So what do we need to do individually to prevent or reduce our risk of having cancer?
Essentially, we need obviously to live our best life in terms of allowing our bodies the best possible opportunity to detoxify. You know, I look at my parents grew up in rural Ireland, and I look at their lifestyle, and now 1 generation later, how much the world has changed in that lifestyle. That's an awful lot of toxicity that we are bombarded with.
Yeah.
I would also suggest, as a lot of people are doing now, is do a genetic test to look at something like 123andMe, where you look at your whole genetic profile, because that will show you where your weaknesses are. Yeah. These are not things that indicate that, yes, you are going to have an issue. But if, you know, it will indicate if you are not methylating well, you're probably not breaking hormones down properly. And if you're not breaking hormones down properly, they're likely to build up to a toxic level and influence hormonal breast cancer. That's largely where hormonal breast cancer comes from. The person isn't aware of this. They may be eating well, running, doing all the right things. But if it's a bit like having a blocked pipe. If the liver isn't able to detoxify what's going on, we need to know that, because we can actually fix these things. We can give the right support. You know, the wonderful Dr. Nasha Winters that you have in America, that is both beloved in our world and absolute genius, talks about the terrain. Yes. And that's perfectly right. We need to make the terrain as healthy as possible. And there are many things we can do for that. But I think we also need individual knowledge. You know, it's worth looking at, asking the questions that no doctor will ever ask. What's going on under the bonnet? You know, where are we likely to be vulnerable? And if you do that, you will find out.
Good point. And it seems that detoxification is one of the main things we need to do, because like you said, we are toxic, right? So how do we detoxify the body in a good, efficient way? Because there's so many different ways out there. Some of them are a little bit crazy, a little bit extreme. So what would you recommend so it's safe for people to do?
Well, what I personally recommend, because I do an awful lot of work with people undergoing treatments and cancer at all stages. And there are many, many different ways to do it. First of all, I'd like to know that the liver is able to detoxify properly. You have to be careful. I'm not an enormous fan of intensive detoxification, because if we have the issues I'm talking about, say, for example, the glutathione pathway, which is one of the main one detoxification pathways in the body. If you have a polymorphism, which is a defect that is inherited from the family, which gives that weakness, that liver isn't capable of detoxing properly. So you do a big detox program, you're going to flush a lot of toxins into the body that isn't going to detoxify well. So first of all, do the simple gene test, find out what your liver is doing, and then detoxify in a way. I personally, particularly with I've you know, a lot of people on treatment, I'd like to treat the liver very carefully. The liver's quite a gentle organ, and detoxification doesn't have to be macho. It doesn't have to be intense. Using things like infrared saunas, bentonite clay baths, using heat, etc. Gentle liver flushing, eating the right foods, of course. And you know, you can take that up to, you know, even you know, as you mentioned, from Gerson, coffee enemas. There are different kinds of things that can help, but get some personal knowledge of what's happening in order to individualize that approach.
What about juicing?
Juicing, of course, yes. Juicing, absolutely, yeah. You know, we need the right things going in. We need the right tools, and you know, what's so interesting is what really drove me out of oncology was, if you don't have the right nutrients, the right vitamins, the right balance in the body, nothing good is going to happen with cancer. And even if treatment is successful, you have set up the terrain of the body to fail afterwards. So all those things are important. And of course, juicing is a marvelous way of detoxing and getting nutrients in really well.
Correct, especially if you're fighting with cancer, right? So juicing is so potent, really gentle. It goes right into the body. So wonderful.
Yeah, it gives you everything you need. And if you look at and this is as appropriate as for pre-cancer, you know, preventing cancer is for dealing with cancer. When you look at the environment in which cancer cells develop in the body, in which they thrive or they attempt to, cancer cells, as you say, they will metabolize glucose, they will metabolize fatty acids, they will metabolize the bad things that we eat, and use them as a fuel source. And then cancer then converts that into lactic acid. So we have this low oxygen inflamed environment that makes for very, very happy cancer cells. It does several things. It switches off the immune system. It stops the immune system from getting in there and doing its job properly. It stops chemotherapy and radiotherapy from doing a complete job. And it hides the stem cells. So the stem cells, that small subpopulation that is going to, if they survive, is going to promote recurrence, are hidden by that. So everything we do is aimed at changing that extracellular environment, or the terrain as nature refers to it. So oxygen, I get all my clients, if possible, either in hyperbaric oxygen chambers. I get them using oxygen machines at home and exercise with their oxygen, deep breathing exercises, heat treatment, both for detoxification and for changing that hypoxia, and make cancer cells vulnerable. And the best way of doing that is starving them of sugar. If you starve cells of sugar, cancer cells, you attack them with chemotherapy, they will start to hide in that environment. They'll start to hibernate like a bear. They'll just switch themselves down until the chemo's finished and gone away, and then, hey, it's party time. So what we do, we work hard on, and get our clients to work hard on, don't just put somebody through chemotherapy, throw a load of chemicals at them, expect them to recover afterwards. We prepare, support them through it, and repair them afterwards. And to prepare for chemotherapy, you starve the glucose, you fast, you use, and fasting is the simplest and most amazing detoxification process. It's been proven in science all over the world as we speak. So you fast, you take things like berberine, you block the glucose. And cancer cells, when they are starved of glucose, they wake up, they crave, they're vulnerable. And then the chemotherapy can go in and do a proper job, or whatever you're using. A lot of people choose not to use chemotherapy, and we have good alternatives for that. So that stands before, don't let glucose be a major part of the diet. Don't let glucose and toxins be a major part of the process going on in your body. Our bodies, I fondly think, our bodies have not had time to adapt to this massive changes in our environment, Dr. Serge. I think too much has happened too soon, too quickly. Yeah. We need to be aware of that, and we need to say, okay, we're going to get the knowledge and help our bodies to help that and prevent that.
Good point. And you describe really well the work of Dr. Otto Warburg, the German, right, who described how cancer cells arise. And he actually won 2 Nobel Prizes for his work, actually. And he did show that the first step is really a reduction of oxygen into our tissues, right, leading to a carb type of burning by the cells, like you said. So you said that we need to stop feeding the cancer the glucose, right? So what nutrition, what diet exactly do you recommend? Like, is it like all starches, no sugar, meat, vegetables? So what do you use with your clients?
It's very individual. I don't have a off-the-shelf thing. One part of that will depend on what their culture is, their diet history. We have clients all over the world, so we have to take that into consideration. But most certainly, and depends on their nutritional status, because some people with cancer have a potential to develop cachexia where they lose a lot of weight. We don't want that. So for those people, we are not going to be as restrictive as others. Yeah. And also looking at their emotional state, are they exhausted? How can they manage? So it's very individual, but it is largely, as you know, of course, the ketogenic diet is very popular. And that is now becoming slightly more flexible with flexible ketogenesis, and usually a combination of fasting, ketogenesis, flexibility, but with a degree of vegetable intake as well. Certainly glucose, sugar, fast foods, processed foods, all those things absolutely out, of course. And low GI on carbs if they are having carbs. Yet I don't actually believe that you can, if someone's in an advanced state of cancer, it's very difficult to starve cancer out of the body by cutting out every single type of food substance in terms of complete carbs, cut out, etc. Generally, people can't manage that. It makes them very unhappy, and you need to nourish the body as well. So it's a case of finding the right balance for each individual person. And we also have things that we can interrupt glucose metabolization with, glucose modulators, things like berberine, metformin, the repurposed drug, 2-deoxy-D-glucose, which is fantastic with treatment. We have ways of interrupting the fatty acids. So with the advent of repurposed drugs as well, it is very easily obtainable now to build a complex process of outfoxing cancer cells that is, I think, far cleverer than using chemotherapy, or if people are using chemotherapy, can help them. If people, I think, knew that this is available, that this knowledge is available, the development of repurposed drugs has been one of the biggest. The science is going on like that all the time. A lot of people, when they're being treated with cancer over a period of time, particularly if they get into stage 4, ask the question, why does everything that is used against cancer have to be so toxic? Where is my quality of life? What am I achieving with this if my days are spent in a state of exhaustion and malnutrition and mouth ulcers and misery? And all I'm facing is that I'm going to become resistant to it at some point. A lot of people are asking big questions. Is there something better? And, for a lot of people, yes, there absolutely can be. I'm not anti-orthodox treatment. I'm not anti anything that works against cancer, but please do not put people through that process and just leave them to recover by themselves. That, I do functional testing on people with cancer. They have their malnutrition, vitamin D levels through the floor, all essential vitamins and minerals are completely depleted. They have lipid imbalances. Everything about that sets them up for recurrence. And because chemotherapy causes that, chemo actually brings about its own demise. So let's be clever with chemo. We are seeing people live well and live long by getting the right knowledge about what to do when they're working with cancer.
So science these days came up with a new hypothesis to explain why chemotherapy fails most of the time, right? I mean, I read some statistic. It was somewhere about 99% of people would die after traditional treatments. And one of our listeners asked about the cancer stem cells. So that's the new explanation, right? So the cancer cells become resistant. That's why it came back. At the end of the day, to me, it's just a way to divert the actual reason why it came back, the terrain, right? So what do you think of this hypothesis?
Of the cancer stem cells? It's absolutely right. Orthodox treatment doesn't get to stem cells. There's very little about it that does. All it's doing is knocking out circulating cells. I must tell you, I've got a 15-year-old son. He's into all things military. He was talking about the First World War, and I said to him, I said, well, that's where chemotherapy came from. And he's going, what? And I said, yes, mustard gas. And he says, really? Somebody looked at mustard gas and decided that's a good idea. I said, yeah, they did actually. It's still in use, mustine. And I said, that's where they developed the idea of chemotherapy from. And he says, Mum, have you given people mustard gas? I said, well, yes, actually I have. So, he's now thinking I'm some sort of chemical terrorist. And he says to me, well, does it work? Did they live? I'm like, well, no, but let's not dwell on the negatives here, son. And he says, but Mum, he says, that is like putting people on the Titanic to teach them how to swim. And I thought that's such a good analogy, because we throw people into this process of chemotherapy. We cause them devastating damage. We cause them potential long-term, and we set up the environment for the cancer to return if that's done without good integrative support. So do they make it to the life rafts or not? That can entirely be down to luck. And people now know this. People know that this process is selling them short, and they are becoming very, very well armed now with knowledge and information. It challenges the doctors tremendously. It really does.
Yeah, good point. Here's a situation that I would like to get your input. Science doesn't really explain this, but over the years, I have observed this with some of my patients. I have this patient, her son died from a car accident. A few weeks later, she has breast cancer. She was perfect health, everything was fine, and now she finds this big mass on her breast. And this is something I have seen with other patients as well, that a trauma or a stress seems to have triggered the tumor to grow. So what is the science? Or how do you explain the stress of an event like that causing the cancer? And what's the role of stress in cancer?
Oh, it's massive. It is massive. I will come back to the stem cells because I realised I didn't answer that. Sorry.
Yeah.
The role of stress is massive. Not for everybody, but for an awful lot of people. And I can't remember the name of it now, but there was a recent, because I've often heard doctors say, oh, stress has nothing to do with this. It's just genetic. It's bad luck. If you're told your cancer is bad luck, go. I'll say don't go find another oncologist, because I'll probably say the same thing. But they recently identified the gene that gets switched on by stress, which is an oncogene. So we talk about cancer not being genetic, but we have genes, oncogenes, that are switched on that will encourage cancer. Yeah. Cancer's all about balance. For example, we all have the BRCA gene. The BRCA protects us against cancer. These people don't have a BRCA gene; they have an overexpression of it. So, so with that, the whole genetic thing is being proven to be of stress. But look at what happens with stress in the body. It's a chemical cascade, particularly if it's extreme stress. Horrendously, a son dying, that devastates everything. Or long-term stress, where we are a balance of chemicals, and that will be thrown into disarray. Cortisol levels go through the roof. Cortisol encourages glucose in the body. One of the stress reactions is inflammation. Inflammation encourages cancer cells. Our adrenal glands pump out adrenaline at times of stress, become flat as a pancake very quick, the rubbish. And then we have adrenal fatigue. And it's an absolute recipe. I always think it's the final straw on the camel's back is stress. Yeah. And again, it can be that acute stress. And for some people, sadly, the stress they carry through life from, traumas that have, are still bubbling away under the surface, that are being suppressed, etc. It's tremendously significant. And that's why if you take a person who's diagnosed with cancer and has been through anything like that. Now, I was talking to a young lady yesterday. She's got an aggressive triple negative cancer. And from being misdiagnosed through to now, her journey has been one of complete and utter stress in the oncology world. She's lost faith immediately, which will stand her in good stead. But you take that and then you throw them into the world of cancer, where they're told, okay, we are going to give you, not we're offering, we're giving you this treatment. Your role here is just to have the treatment. It's going to make you ill. It's going to suppress your immune system. You might be feeling quite well. You're going to be unwell. And then we're going to do this, and then we're going to do something else, and just get on the conveyor belt. And then the person starts asking the questions of how may I support myself? What is my role in this? What is my role out of this? When it stops, what happens? And you have no role. You're not in charge. It's such a power base. I call it Alice in Cancerland, because that's exactly how it feels, because a lot of it doesn't make sense. Uh-huh. And then when they challenge the fact it doesn't make sense, they get shot down. Nobody's answering those questions. So it's the stress thing, Dr. Serge, you are completely right. It's massive, it's powerful. So to add to that with more stress is not a good thing.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate, but we are so stressed out. I mean, I see a lot of people that are burned out, especially since the beginning of the pandemic last year, they're just like, they're depleted, they're stressed, they don't sleep well, stress hormones are all the roof. And of course, when you're in that situation, you have a higher risk of having issues like cancer, right? So, I mean, it's amazing to me that some people could actually have cancer within a few weeks, but I have some patients who fought cancer within a few months. They were able to reverse with nutrition. I met a lady yesterday, within a month, she had a stage 3 cancer. She changed 100% the diet, alkaline diet, and the cancer went away within 4 weeks.
Yeah.
So it's powerful. So there's still hope for people out there.
There absolutely is. The power of what people achieve.
Yes.
Is people have enormous potential to heal. Natural things will help people heal. Natural things can get to stem cells. I could show you all the research, the evidence of how natural compounds will get to stem cells much better than any chemotherapy will. And ultimately, if anyone's going to survive cancer, the body's got to be doing it. The body's got to be controlling the situation. So we need to fix the person. We need to help the person fix themselves.
Yeah.
And that is just not happening in oncology. It's just tragic. I just think we've got it all wrong about how we deal with cancer. We really have. And also, and this is a massive topic that I deal with almost daily, is the negativity that comes across from the oncology world. When I was a young nurse, some time ago now, we didn't say very much to people. This is like 30 odd years ago. People weren't that informed. They were scared. Doctor's going to treat you. Lovely. Off we go. Jolly good. And they didn't ask many questions. They didn't know what to ask. So there was it was a very quiet process in that respect. It was only when we got to the end of, okay, that's it. We're done. We've got nothing more that's going to work. And I distinctly remember the shock and anger was kind of, how did we get here? Because we didn't know this is where we were going. No one's actually really told us that. But we've changed now, and the medical world cannot tell people often enough how ultimately this is going to fail. This is just going to be palliative. This is your timeline. You have this prognosis, and this is what we expect from you. They just, and even when I've got, I've clients who are doing terribly well, years beyond any prognosis, they're still saying yes, but, and all that goes in. The yes buts, the negativity. If they could just have some humility and say, we don't have all the answers. We've got this treatment to offer you. It's going to do quite a bit of damage, but there are things that you can do about that. We're on your side. We're part of your team. There are many other things that you can bring in that holistically can help you, but they don't. They knock it all down, and that, I think, is really, really bad thing.
Yeah. I mean, you just described my situation, actually my experience. About 15 years ago, I was working in a hospital setting. My son was diagnosed with cancer. The doctor really scared us. He said, if you don't start chemo right now, he's going to die. But on the other side, they told us that there's nothing we can do for him. We're just going to try, maybe give him a few months, a few years. And at the end of the day, the chemo destroyed his body. He was young. He was about 2 years old. Oh. And then back then, I didn't really understand what happened to him. He went so fast. What do you think? Why do you think small persons like babies, infants, have cancer so young?
I honestly don't know the answer to that. I honestly don't know the answer to that. That is much more likely to be a defect. I really don't know. But as you say, a lot of, we talk about all the toxins and things like that, but clearly that's not the case with children.
No, exactly.
Yeah, it really isn't. And, that's the worst possible thing that can happen and to experience. And, there really isn't enough research goes into why do people get cancer? What goes on beforehand? Never mind, let's throw, really expensive drugs at them and, have this massive industry, all at these sticking plaster side of things. But, it's a terrible emphasis that we have, that we've got it that way around, I think.
Yeah.
and not looking at getting these treatments working. I mean, for example, I've talked about, how chemotherapy sort of ultimately brings about its own demise in resistance terms. Look at immunotherapy. Immunotherapy is doing the same thing. Immunotherapy is causing terrible side effects. They're not quite the same as chemotherapy, but they're equally as bad, if not worse, in some cases. And with the exception of a couple of types of cancer, such as melanoma, renal cancers, that are doing pretty well, and one or two other bits and pieces, you look at the overall response to chemotherapy, it's 20%, Dr. Serge, 20%. 80% of people are having immunotherapy at great personal cost to their physical and mental health, and it's just not working.
Wow. I didn't know that statistic.
Yeah.
That's sad. It's really unfortunate, because if they would have spent that much money on individual, getting them healthier, we would have won the battle of cancer a long time ago.
Absolutely. And the interesting reasons that we know so far as to why immunotherapy doesn't work, one is that you can't get a T cell response. The T cells of the immune system which fight the cancer are displaced. They're not even inside the tumors, or they can't get in there. And obviously someone who's developed cancer has got a suppressed immune system. So why don't we work on the immune system first? If we can help prepare people for immunotherapy, they'll do better. But the big thing, and this surely must bring about a change where integrative medicine is more recognized, because we talk about the liver, but obviously equally important the gut health, etc.
Yeah.
We know that's a major reason for chemotherapy failing, but it's now been proven beyond doubt that that's a major reason why immunotherapy fails. So if people do not have good gut health, immunotherapy is not going to work. And in fact, I was talking to an amazing doctor in Vienna the other day, and they do tremendous preparation and then give low doses of immunotherapy, and they're getting fantastic results. And one of the things that they're doing, and this is working with Crohn's disease, with colitis, is fecal transplants. Yes. So they're transferring healthy bacteria via the feces of somebody with a gut microbiome, and that's a very fast and effective way of getting the gut fixed. But if somebody goes in for immunotherapy and their immune system is depressed and the gut is a mess, if they come from chemotherapy and no one's looked at them as an individual and says, let's repair you first, they stand a good chance of the immunotherapy failing, sadly.
So you mentioned the gut. I'm glad you actually brought this topic, because there is this doctor in Italy, right? I'm sure you heard of him. He claims that 90%-ish of cancer is fungal. Is there any truth behind this?
I think cancer is many things. I think cancer can be many things. I do know the doctor you mean. And certainly there is fungal-like elements about what is known about cancer in the changing of the pH.
Yeah.
In the way that it operates in the body. At times it's almost viral-like as well, in the way that it operates, and it mutates and it changes. So I personally don't think it is a fungus in itself, but certainly a lot of the elements that will help it can be very fungal.
Yeah.
You wipe out the gut microbiome with chemotherapy, the person is going to have candida. Candida's fungus. It will grow right the way up the gastrointestinal tract and suppress the immune system.
Yeah.
And certainly, yes, when people get their body from an acidic to an alkaline state that really does actually work as an antifungal, then yes, there is there is certainly evidence that can change things tremendously. Some of the repurposed drugs that work on parasites, that work as antifungal treatments, are part of the package of repurpose that people have great success with. So there's certainly something in it. I wouldn't like to hang my hat on exactly what it is at the moment, but it's very exciting what's happening, where old drugs that are used to treat all sorts of things, dog worming tablets, mebendazole, is all part of this process. So I think it's a case of there's so many different phases of cancer metabolism to interrupt, But when you come at it with a multifaceted program, that's when you have success.
Really good point. You have to look at why cancer is developed in the body, right? And there's many factors. So I know there's some people who are watching us today. They are fighting cancer. They were diagnosed with cancer. Can you give us some hope as a final word? What would you tell them? What would you recommend them to do in order to win the battle?
I would tell them, find yourselves a good practitioner who can help you with this, because there's everything about integration I've kind of said in a very positive way. There can be some negatives, of course, because it can be very confusing. There's a million and one choices out there. So one of my roles is to, help people identify and narrow it down. Okay, what are the priorities here? What do we know? Hopefully, if funds afford, get some functional testing, identify where the priorities are, get to know about your type of cancer and how it metabolizes, and work out what are the things that are likely to be interrupting the different pathways. There's many that are uniform to all in terms of glucose, fatty acids, toxicity, liver support, etc. So do that. Do your research. Learn about repurposed drugs. Learn about the terrain of the body. Learn about what really helps cancer and helps cancer thrive, and change it. Don't have that going on. And if you're going through any orthodox treatment and you're being told there's nothing that you can do, don't take anything. It might interfere with the treatment. Do not take that advice from your doctors. Get yourself somebody who knows how to judge interactions, who knows what interrupts and what doesn't. It's vastly overrated. We have thank God we have people like Dr. Nasha Winston who are now training doctors so that they actually appreciate these things. But so often when doctors say, no, you can't do something, it might interfere with treatment, they got no idea.
Yeah.
They got no idea. That's just a lazy answer. Yeah. It's much easier to say that. I've spoken to pharmacists and they say, well, we haven't got time to check everyone's program. And they haven't. They're not given the funds. The whole thing, we need the medical world to start to acknowledge that there is more to healing than just what they're doing, and that there is value in these things. So get themselves information. Knowledge is power, and you've got to empower yourself. I always teach my clients, shrink your medical team. They're just your drug dealers. Shrink them, give them less power, because they the whole process is set up to take power away from people. Yeah. Shrink them, make you the center, build your team around you. And when you do that, to me, the whole thing, Dr. Serge, is really, it's about people becoming their own healers. It's not about anybody fixing you. It's not about any one thing that will fix you. Is the journey to become your own healer. And everything about orthodox medicine tells you can't do that. And but by golly, you can. You really can.
Yeah. Well said. And you're so right. I can tell when people surround themselves with the right team, they win. They win, and it's possible. So you guys, if you are diagnosed with cancer, or you're dealing with cancer, fighting cancer, or you know somebody who's fighting with cancer, please reach out to Patricia. How can we reach out to you?
Through Cancer Options. Cancer Options is my organization. We are. The Peat Institute is our training site for training any practitioners who want to learn all about cancer and how to support people, and all the research behind it. Cancer Options, we work with people all around the world. We organize treatments around the world. We know all the different clinics, everything that's going off, the good, the bad, and the ugly, I have to say. It's not all good. And help people work out what is the right process for them. I always say it's a bit like a game of chess. We have our strategies now. We know where we're going next. We've got some thoughts on where we might go further on. And I was talking to a gentleman this morning. Lovely gentleman. I nearly said his name then, sorry. Lovely gentleman, lives in Brighton. And I met him a couple of years ago. Prostate cancer, metastatic, PSA over 1,000. About 4 years ago now. He's actually been off his hormone treatment for 2 years because his oncologist was so pleased with him. And his PSA is still below 1 from over 1,000. And that's
Wow.
what he's, you know. And
Great testimony.
Yeah, it's great.
That's amazing.
Good man.
Everything is possible. Everything is possible. The body is amazing.
Yes, the body's amazing if we give it the opportunity.
Yes.
And as I say, by all means, use oncology treatment. Sometimes they're necessary. Sometimes we need to give cancer a bash on the head. It's okay. Everything's okay.
Exactly.
But make sure you know where you're going with it. Make sure you know where you're going at the other end of that. That's the important thing.
Exactly. Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. It was really, really good information today. So I hope you guys will reach out to her organizations. So thank you for your time, and you guys have a good weekend, okay?
Yep. Thank you all. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Dr. Serge.
You're welcome.